The Titanic sinking. On April 15, 1912, the RMS Titanic struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank. Muggle history calls it a tragic accident. Wizarding records quietly call it containment failure. For decades before the voyage, that stretch of ocean had been classified by the Department of Magical Transportation as a Dementor migration corridor, a naturally frigid region where despair-heavy currents made Dementor movement unusually stable. Cold wasn't the problem. Hope was, and the Titanic carried a dangerous concentration of it. Wealth, ambition, confidence, and human pride packed into one floating beacon. According to sealed Wizengamot notes, Dementors were drawn to the ship's emotional density. The iceberg was not random. Oceanic magical fauna, kelpies, and abyssal serpents were subtly coerced to shift ice flows into the Titanic's path. The impact disrupted enchantments meant to mask Dementor presence from Muggles, triggering a feeding event the Ministry could not reverse in time. This event also intersects tragically with Lita Lestrange. As revealed in Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, Lita was aboard the Titanic as a child. A magical identity swap, an act of panic, not malice, sealed her brother's fate. Wizarding psychologists later classified this as one of the earliest documented cases of unintentional lethal magic under emotional distress. The fallout reshaped wizarding law. Emergency memory modification teams were deployed across 3 continents. Survivors reported unnatural cold, silence, and a crushing sense of dread. Classic Dementor symptoms, yet Obliviators suppressed the pattern. Most importantly, the disaster accelerated negotiations that led to the Azkaban Agreement. If Dementors could not be relocated safely, they would be contained, bound to a fixed location in exchange for service as guards. The North Sea territory was chosen for its compatibility with their nature. And yes, just to clear this up once and for all, why the heck didn't Jack get on the door with Rose? Because by that point he was already under Dementor influence. Survivors reported emotional numbness, collapsing self-preservation, and an overwhelming urge to let go. Jack wasn't thinking logically. He was operating inside a high despair zone, exactly how Dementors weaken human will. There, mystery solved. The construction of the Egyptian pyramids. Long before the International Statute of Secrecy, the Egyptian pyramids stood as something extraordinary to both worlds. To Muggles, they were tombs. To wizards, they were magical engineering on a scale never replicated again. The Great Pyramids of Giza, built during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu around 2560 BCE, was not constructed by magic alone, but it could not have been built without it. Ancient Egyptian wizard priests developed the earliest proto-forms of levitation magic, direct ancestors of what modern witches and wizards would later refine into Wingardium Leviosa. These spells were unstable, exhausting, and required dozens of casters working in harmonic unison. But they allowed stone blocks weighing up to 70 tons to be lifted, positioned, and aligned with impossible precision. The pyramids functioned as magical amplifiers. They concentrated ley line energy, preserved enchantments, and created semi-permanent wards designed to protect the dead and the magic buried with them. This era marked the peak of collaborative magic, when wizard and Muggle labor worked openly together. No secrecy, no hiding, just shared ambition. But it couldn't last. As magical knowledge advanced, its dangers became clear. Curses began leaking. To magic turned lethal. Entire dynasties fell to enchanted relics they no longer understood. Eventually, wizarding authorities made a decision that would echo through history. Magical construction of this scale would never happen again in the open. The pyramids remain, not as monuments to slaves or kings, but as the last visible scars of a world where magic and humanity built together and paid the price. The Atomic Age. By 1945, the wizarding world believed it understood the limits of non-magical power. That assumption collapsed in August when Muggles deployed atomic weapons over Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th. Within hours, magical authorities worldwide initiated immediate lockdown procedures. For centuries, wizards believed that true large-scale devastation required magic. Dark magic, ritual magic, forbidden experimental spellcraft. And yet, here were Muggles, splitting atoms and unleashing power comparable to the most dangerous spells ever banned by the Ministry. The response was immediate. Magical sensors registered anomalies across Asia and Europe, enchantments destabilizing wards briefly failing, long-standing protections flickering. Unspeakables classified the events as Category existential threat, non-magical origin. Ministries worldwide entered emergency protocol. Entire magical communities in Japan and nearby regions activated mass concealment charms, evacuation wards, and long-range shielding spells to survive the consequences. But there was an uncomfortable side effect. The chaos created the perfect cover. Some wizards quietly tested highly restricted destructive magic, spells that would normally leave unmistakable signatures. Amid global confusion and fallout, magical disturbances blended seamlessly into Muggle explanations. Fear spread fast. If Muggles could reach this level without wands, what would come next? And timing made it worse. 1945 was also the year Gellert Grindelwald fell. The wizarding world had just survived its greatest dark wizard, only to realize that magic was no longer the most dangerous force on Earth. From that moment on, the international Statute of Secrecy wasn't just policy, it was survival. The discovery of Godzilla. In 1954, Japan introduced the world to Godzilla, officially framed as a product of nuclear testing and radiation. The Japanese wizarding community knew immediately something was wrong. Godzilla did not register as any known magical classification, not a dragon, not a basilisk variant, not a magically animated beast. There were no spell signatures, no wand-aligned energy traces, no ancient runes binding it. This terrified wizard historians. Internal records from Mahoto Koro describe Godzilla as a non-wizarding apex anomaly, a being that existed outside known magical taxonomies. Unlike dragons, which responded to charms, Godzilla ignored containment spells, shielding hexes and calming enchantments entirely. Magic didn't fail, it was simply irrelevant. This triggered unprecedented tension between Japanese witches and wizards and their Muggle government. Wizards were accused of hiding or even creating the creature. Emergency councils debated whether revealing magic might help Muggles understand the threat, but the risk of global exposure was too high. The International Confederation of Wizards classified Godzilla as a category null entity, neither magical nor Muggle, something older, deeper, and fundamentally incompatible with wizard control. From that moment on, wizarding doctrine shifted. Magic was no longer considered the ultimate authority over the natural world. Godzilla changed everything. It forced the wizarding world to accept a humbling truth. Some forces do not belong to magic and cannot be governed by it, only survived. The Roswell UFO crash. In July 1947, something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. Muggles called it a weather balloon. Wizards immediately classified it as a temporal incident. According to sealed Makuza files, the object was not a spacecraft. It was a time displacement capsule, the result of an illegal time-turner experiment conducted decades earlier. The goal was radical: remove a highly unstable magical being from the current timeline entirely. That being a fully transformed werewolf. Wizarding historians believe this incident coincides with the earliest classified entry in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander, describing an off-registry lycanthropic specimen that did not match any known European bloodlines. Rather than contain it or execute it, unspeakables attempted to extract it from time itself. The spell partially worked. The creature and the containment vessel re-entered reality violently over New Mexico. Aurors arriving on site reported severe wand instability, time dilation, and memory fragmentation. Stunning spells failed. Healing charms malfunctioned. The being recovered showed signs of chronological decay, as if it no longer belonged to any moment. Makuza enacted its first non-human, non-magical, non-temporal cover-up. Obliviator's struggled memories involving time fractures proved resistant, giving rise to persistent UFO folklore. Roswell permanently changed wizarding law. From that moment on, time turners were restricted, monitored, and eventually locked away. Because Roswell proved a terrifying truth. You don't erase problems by removing them from time, you just create new ones out of sequence. Chernobyl. When reactor number 4 at Chernobyl exploded on April 26, 1986, the wizarding world initially categorized it as a severe but ordinary Muggle industrial accident. That classification lasted less than 12 hours. Within the first day, magical monitoring stations across Eastern Europe reported something unprecedented. Spells collapsing after successful casting, protective wards degraded, enchanted objects lost stability, potion ingredients harvested hundreds of miles away spoiled without explanation. This wasn't simply radiation. The reactor had been constructed directly above a dormant ley line convergence, a naturally occurring channel that had supplied low-level ambient magic to the region for centuries. Wizards had long known the area as magically quiet but stable, ideal for settlements, wards, and long-term enchantments. The explosion tore straight through that balance. What followed wasn't anti-magic, but structural interference. Magic still existed, but it refused to hold shape. Transfiguration became unreliable. Healing spells failed mid-process. Even experienced witches and wizards reported wand feedback and spell recoil. The ministry's response was swift and final. The region was classified as a permanent magical degradation zone. No attempts at magical cleansing were authorized. No reconstruction spells permitted. Ironically, Chernobyl reshaped wizarding containment policy worldwide. For the first time, magic accepted a limitation. Some damage could not be repaired. Yet, it also provided cover. Entire zones could now be sealed indefinitely under Muggle authority. Cursed land became radioactive. Magical instability became containment. The end of Atlantis. Long before Hogwarts, before wands as we know them, before the Statute of Secrecy, Atlantis was the most advanced magical society on Earth. Ancient runic records, fragments later hidden inside the Vatican's restricted collections, describe Atlantis as a spell-engineered city, powered by ley lines, oceanic magic, and wandless amplification. But Atlantis had a problem. Muggles were getting too close. As early human civilizations began mapping the skies and seas, Atlantean magic became increasingly detectable. The city's enchantments bent tides, altered weather patterns, and created anomalies that early Muggle astronomers noticed. Wizard elders feared discovery on a global scale, centuries before secrecy laws even existed. So, they made an impossible choice. Around 9600 BCE, a joint conclave of Atlantean archmages initiated the Great Veiling, a catastrophic controlled collapse of the city into the ocean. Not an accident, a strategic disappearance. Massive transfiguration spells destabilized the seabed, while memory-altering magic rewrote surviving Muggle myths into legend. Atlantis didn't vanish, it fractured. Its wizarding population dispersed across the world, seeding magical bloodlines in Egypt, Greece, Mesopotamia, and later Europe. Many foundational spells, protective wards, architectural enchantments, and even early wand theory trace back to Atlantean design. The end of Atlantis taught the wizarding world its first brutal lesson. Magic cannot coexist openly with progress. From that moment on, secrecy became survival. The discovery of the Bermuda Triangle, when Muggles began documenting mass disappearances in the Atlantic during the 1950s. They unknowingly uncovered one of the wizarding world's greatest failures. The Bermuda Triangle was not natural. It was a former time-turner laboratory zone. Following early time manipulation breakthroughs, unspeakables established offshore temporal testing grounds, far from cities, hidden beneath layered concealment charms. The goal was controlled observation of paradox resolution, object displacement, and loop stabilization. Instead, they broke time. Repeated jumps weakened reality, creating a chronal sinkhole where space, time, and magic stopped aligning. Ships didn't vanish, they slipped out of sequence. Compasses failed because north no longer existed there in a consistent way. Enchantments unraveled mid-cast. Muggle losses escalated. Cargo ships vanished. Aircraft disappeared. Governments accused wizarding authorities of orchestrated magical theft. International tensions exploded. Emergency summits were held with the International Confederation of Wizards. Experimental temporal magic was outlawed outside tightly controlled facilities. Permanent wards were installed, not to fix the triangle, but to contain it. The Bermuda Triangle remains active because it cannot be closed without collapsing surrounding timelines. Wizards chose confusion over catastrophe. To this day, it stands as a warning burned into wizarding doctrine. Time is not a tool, it's a force, and it remembers when you break it. The destruction of Pompeii. On August 24th, 79 CE, Pompeii was erased in a matter of hours when Mount Vesuvius erupted. Muggle history records ash, lava, and tragedy. Wizarding history records something far worse, the single greatest loss of magical knowledge in the ancient world. Pompeii was not just a Roman city, it was a wizarding crossroads due to its cultural openness and distance from centralized magical authorities. Witches and wizards operated openly within Muggle society. Spellwork was disguised as religion, potions passed as medicine. Private villas housed pre-wand grimoires, enchanted scrolls, experimental alchemy, and early spell theory that never made it into modern magical education. When Vesuvius erupted, wizard evacuation protocols failed. Ash disrupted apparition. Flu routes collapsed. Portkeys malfunctioned under intense geomantic shock. Entire magical families were trapped. The destruction wiped out hundreds of spell variants, fire manipulation techniques, healing charms, and hybrid Roman Greek enchantments that were never rediscovered. Some spells taught at Hogwarts today are incomplete reconstructions based on fragments recovered centuries later. In response, wizarding authorities quietly rewrote policy. Magical libraries were decentralized. No single city would ever again hold so much unprotected knowledge. This tragedy directly influenced later secrecy efforts and the eventual creation of protected institutions like Hogwarts. Pompeii taught the wizarding world a devastating truth. Magic survives wars and dark wizards, but it is helpless against the earth itself. Some knowledge wasn't forbidden, it was simply buried too deep to save. The moon landing. On July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon, the wizarding world collectively froze. Not because a Muggle had reached space, but because he had reached magically neutral territory. For centuries, space had been assumed to be unreachable by non-magical means. Wizards knew the moon existed, of course, lunar cycles, power potion brewing, werewolf transformations, and dozens of advanced enchantments. But no one expected Muggles to physically arrive there, especially not with cameras. The moment Apollo 11 entered lunar orbit, unspeakables at the Department of Mysteries detected massive magical fluctuations. The moon isn't enchanted in the traditional sense, but it is deeply reactive to magic. The presence of unshielded humans caused spell resonance spikes never recorded before. Even worse, the astronauts unknowingly passed through residual magical fields tied to ancient lunar enchantments used by early wizard astronomers. Nothing visible, nothing dramatic, just subtle interference, instruments glitching, radio delays, and that eerie feeling Armstrong later described as the moon watching back. The ministry's panic was immediate. Emergency protocols were drafted to prevent future Muggle missions from disturbing magical lunar balance. Experimental concealment charms were quietly tested in low orbit, and for the first time ever, the International Confederation of Wizards formally classified outer space as a potential Statute of Secrecy risk. Ironically, the moon landing benefited wizards too. It confirmed that Muggle science had limits. No magic detected, no spells exposed, reinforcing confidence that secrecy could survive technological progress. Oh, and one last weird detail. When Dobby was sent ahead to tidy up the moon before Muggles arrived, he reportedly found a nose, just lying there, very pale, very suspicious. No one knows how it got there, but some say Voldemort visited the moon once, realized there was no one left to fear him, and simply forgot it behind. Classic. NASA and Area 51. When NASA was officially founded in 1958, the wizarding world didn't panic immediately. They got nervous. Because NASA wasn't just about rockets, it was about seeing things humans were never meant to see. Satellites, telescopes, surveillance. All tools that slowly chipped away at the safety net protecting magical secrecy. But the real alarm bells rang much earlier in 1947, with the quiet expansion of Area 51 in Nevada. To Muggles, Area 51 became synonymous with aliens. To wizards, it was something far more uncomfortable. A Muggle facility unknowingly poking at magical anomalies. The desert surrounding Area 51 sits on unstable magical ground. Ancient ley line fractures, leftover enchantments, and residual magical energy that distorts perception. Wizards had avoided the region for centuries. Muggles built laboratories on top of it. As Cold War paranoia grew, Muggle scientists began detecting things they couldn't explain. Gravity inconsistencies, electromagnetic distortions, objects behaving incorrectly. Wizards recognized these immediately as side effects of dormant magical fields. The Ministry's response was subtle but massive. Obliviators were embedded. Misinformation campaigns encouraged the alien narrative. Better for Muggles to believe in little green men than in spellcraft. Ironically, NASA pushed wizarding innovation forward. Anti-detection charms were upgraded. New concealment spells were developed for satellites. The modern Statute of Secrecy we know today exists largely because space technology forced magic to evolve. Merlin's beard. You seem like the kind of wizard who enjoys Muggle chaos. Excellent. You're in the right place. Your next Stickman Hogwarts lesson is on screen. Click now before Dobby snaps his fingers and sends you to the moon. And watch your nose.